Severus's praise made Old Knot nearly burst with excitement. He rubbed his hands together, leaned toward Severus, and whispered, "All of this is for the Dark Lord. Will I have a chance to meet him? The Dark Lord doesn't seem well. Perhaps I could help. The Knot family keeps many rare herbs and potions. They might be useful." Severus unhurriedly put the object back into his briefcase. He settled into the high-backed chair, one arm resting on the case, his eyes fixed on Old Knot. A faint, teasing smile played on his lips, but he said nothing. Under that gaze, Old Knot felt a chill run down his spine. Severus was no longer the same as before. After that night, everyone could see his status among the Death Eaters would change dramatically. At the very least, he would stand alongside Bellatrix and the others, perhaps even second only to one person. Old Knot's eyes darted under the stare, his smile thinning. Finally, Severus spoke softly. "Don't ask more about the Dark Lord's condition than you ought to. Whether you meet him will depend on his wishes." He studied Old Knot a moment longer. "And the real credit for that object belongs to Lucius. We both know that, don't we? He'd already made the preparations. Because he still had to finish the unicorn mission for the Dark Lord, he let you take the credit." Old Knot bristled. "Do you think the Dark Lord couldn't figure that out?" Severus's voice was gentle. "What to you seems a remarkable feat is nothing to the Dark Lord." Old Knot's face flickered. It sounded like mockery, and he stiffened. Then Severus added, "I have a task from the Dark Lord. I can let you help prepare for it. If it succeeds, it will be your true merit, one the Dark Lord will remember." Old Knot paused, then, suspicious, asked, "Why involve me with something the Dark Lord entrusted to you in secret?" Severus tapped the briefcase with his fingers. "You must understand how many among our ranks still look down on me. Even Lucius, who deals with me best, keeps himself aloof." Old Knot neither confirmed nor denied, merely leaned back and studied Severus with a thinly veiled disdain. The pure-blood Death Eaters had always looked down on Severus for his half-blood bloodline. 8 years ago, when Voldemort held true power, Severus's reputation among the Dark Lord's servants in Britain had been unremarkable. The Dark Lord thought highly of him, and Severus and Lucius had a Slytherin sort of camaraderie, but Severus could never be wholly accepted into the inner circle. That disdain had not vanished, even now that he had become Voldemort's right hand. People like Old Knot flatter him outwardly because of Voldemort, but privately they still despise an impure blood. Severus knew it. They knew it too. He remained unruffled. "Because of that, even if the Dark Lord orders you to obey me, you will not be enthusiastic. I need you as an intermediary. I won't give direct commands. I'll hand you the plan, and you'll gather the people." Old Knot sneered. "Do you think I'm a fool? After the mission is done, will you tell the Dark Lord I did the work?" Severus shrugged. "Finish the mission, and you need not worry about credit. Someone will vouch for you." Old Knot watched him, unconvinced. "What has the Dark Lord asked you to do?" Severus glanced out at Diagon Alley. People flowed past the shop, unaware of the conversation inside. The door had been closed, and the shop assistant sent away. There was no one to overhear. He spoke plainly. "A jailbreak." Old Knot's pupils tightened. He sprang up, glancing left and right as if to make sure no one was listening, then sat again, his face taut. "A jailbreak from where? Which prison?" Severus crossed his legs, calm. "Which prison would warrant the Dark Lord's intervention?" "Azkaban. That's our target." Remember, Old Knot went pale. "Azkaban? The Dark Lord wants you to break the Lestranges out?" He groped for reasons to dissuade him. "But what's the point? They've been on that island so long. If they're not dead, they're mad. They won't be useful. And Rodolphus's vault. We only gained that object by using our ministry connections, forcing Gringotts to pass the vault to a distant nephew. If he were rescued... No, there's no chance of rescuing them. Dementors guard that island. Only a Patronus will work against them. We can't get them out. It's impossible." Severus listened to the stream of excuses, then said quietly, "I agree with everything you say, but do you dare to tell that to the Dark Lord?" The question shut Old Knot up. "The Dark Lord will rescue the Lestranges," Severus continued, picking up the briefcase. "Don't worry about Rodolphus's vault. The object was arranged by the Dark Lord. Once they're truly rescued, no one will dare question him about it. As for how to get them out, you have many contacts in the ministry, don't you? leak the news of the Dark Lord's return to them, and let those people help. Dementors are not truly ministry personnel. We all know their peculiar status. Old Knot watched Severus rise. He had less time to decide than he had hoped. Since the Dark Lord had entrusted the task to Severus, whether Old Knot wanted to lead it or not, he would have to be involved. Severus had offered him command. If it succeeded, the rewards would be enormous. But the logistics were daunting. To break anyone out of Azkaban would require mobilizing the Death Eaters, activating all their ministry contacts, and relying on utterly dependable allies. And the very act of breaking into Azkaban would announce to the world that the Dark Lord had returned and his followers were back. Old Knot was not a fool. He understood the implications. If Voldemort was authorizing such a brazen act, it meant he would soon be at full strength again. With that reckoning, Old Knot finally said, "I'll arrange them." Severus allowed himself a relieved smile and patted Old Knot's shoulder before he left. "The Dark Lord will look forward to your performance." After that meeting, Severus sent the object back to Hogwarts, then went to another meeting with Amicus. This meeting was also important. Amicus had, in the 2 days since his task was assigned, gathered those villains who'd originally rallied around Barty Crouch Jr. He'd told them the Dark Lord had been found by Severus and had them write letters to Barty Crouch Jr. and to Perkins, who were abroad, announcing the Dark Lord's return. Now, it was Severus's turn to see them. It was not the first time Severus had faced this group. They had met once before at the Crouch family home and had nearly come to blows. This time, the arrogance they'd once shown him had vanished. Whether Dolohov, Travers, Bruno Selwyn, or the others, they now begged for mercy. "We were deceived by Barty Crouch Jr., Dolohov wailed. "He told us that following him would bring the Dark Lord back. We did what he asked. If it weren't for the Dark Lord, we would never have obeyed him." "Yes, we only wanted to bring the Dark Lord back. We never meant to betray him," Bruno cried. "When we sensed the Dark Lord's summons, we contacted Amicus. We thought it must be you, Severus. You're the Dark Lord's most trusted." They flattered him, pleaded for forgiveness. Severus sat coldly in the high-backed chair. These men had chosen the wrong side. It was no surprise they were begging now. It was fortunate they had not yet been branded traitors outright. They could not expect the same leniency as those who had been caught outright. Severus's curiosity was sharpest about Barty Crouch Jr.'s movements. "Why did Barty go to Albania?" They answered eagerly. "A month ago, he took people to Little Hangleton. He seemed to find something there. Then he ran across Britain, many places, no results, until finally he took Perkins to Albania." "Right. He made us pull the Auror's attention during that time, too, but he never had results." "He's a liar. He didn't know where the Dark Lord was. He only used it to gather us." Severus's expression tightened. Little Hangleton, Voldemort's ancestral home, where one of the Horcruxes had been hidden, the ring. He'd planned to go there after today to search for Voldemort's old house and recover the remaining Horcrux besides Harry's. Now he had a theory. Barty Crouch Jr. probably found that ring and used it to go to Albania. "Where is Barty Crouch Jr. now?" Severus asked. Dolohov, eager to take credit, said, "After meeting Amicus, I wrote to him. If he doesn't want to be a traitor, he'll be on his way now." Bruno added, "Barty can be extreme and impulsive, but his loyalty to the Dark Lord is unquestionable. Once he gets the letter, he'll certainly return." Severus did not linger. Before he left, he told Amicus, "If Barty Crouch Jr. comes looking for you, write to me immediately." 242. Pure Soul. Severus had always taken a certain comfort in the secrecy surrounding the Horcruxes. Voldemort had hidden that secret so well that, aside from Dumbledore slowly piecing the truth together and hunting the Horcruxes one by one, even the Dark Lord's followers did not understand how their master had cheated death. For that reason, Severus had never imagined anyone could be racing him to find them. Yet an unexpected turn had occurred on Barty Crouch's side. He had freed himself from his father's control sooner than anyone expected and fled home. Then, astonishingly, he had actually found the Gaunt Shack, Voldemort's birthplace. On the road to Little Hangleton, Severus reviewed the past few months and how his actions had affected Barty. That Barty could break free so early owed much to Severus's role in the potion poisoning affair, which had shamed the Ministry and kept Old Crouch's mind on work rather than on home. Barty had also arranged with Greyback to cause trouble to cover his disappearance. Before the escape plan had truly been set in motion, he had been under the imperious curse and incapable of taking care of himself. It was possible, too, that Barty had felt something sooner. In the original story, when he fled, Voldemort had already begun to return secretly to Britain to prepare his resurrection. Barty, occupied with readying his master's return, had seen no need to seek him out. Severus pondered that as he reached Little Hangleton. Finding the ruined gaunt shack was no easy task. After questioning villagers and walking 4 or 5 miles in the dusk from Great Hangleton, he finally stood before the long-decayed house. Moss clung to the walls. Many roof tiles had gone, leaving rafters exposed. Nettles crowded the yard, their tops level with the tiny, grime-darkened windows. A dead snake nailed to the door made clear nobody had visited in years. Yet the villagers told him someone had come searching the shanty not long ago. Severus approached the door. Beside the decaying wood lay a fresh, vivid green leaf. There were no trees inside the yard. The oaks outside bore nothing like it. The leaf had been brought recently, within days, otherwise it would not still look so bright. Without a word, Severus drew his wand from his sleeve. Several names flickered through his mind until one settled like a weight. Barty Crouch, Jr. He did not hesitate. Narrowing his eyes, he pushed the door open. Inside, dust and moss dulled the light. A thin yellow beam of sunset fell across the room and rested on the young man slumped in an old armchair. He looked up without surprise. "I thought you might not come in once you guessed someone was inside, Senior Snape," he said, voice casual, without the strain or fear his underlings showed. In this contest to see who would find Voldemort first, he already looked certain of victory. Severus took in the ransacked room. "And why would I be afraid to enter?" He met Barty's stare. "You know what this house is, whose it once was, and yet you've turned it into a mess and expect I wouldn't step inside." Barty did not flinch. "Did you find the master in Albania?" Severus sneered. "No need to ask. You were there. You felt his summons." "You searched for him and found him," Barty said, eyes going cold. "But something about you is wrong. Your loyalty isn't the kind that wants nothing but gain." "You have other aims, bigger and more dangerous ones," Severus replied flatly. "My loyalty to the master is enough. Others' opinions mean nothing." Barty's face hardened. "What you've done is different. You've taken the master's property." "It's a clue he left to help himself be found," Barty shot back. Severus laughed, a thin, mirthless sound, and drew his wand. "Really? Where have you hidden it?" "I will return it only to the master," Barty said. Severus's expression softened with a look of pity. "I'm giving you a chance, Crouch. If the master doesn't know, you can still pretend to be loyal." "I will see the master," Barty insisted. Severus sheathed his wand and, without further ceremony, produced a teacup from his cloak pocket. He could have dueled the man, but summoning his master was easier. When he lifted the lid, a translucent, malevolent presence coalesced, and a cold voice filled the room. "Have I been too lenient, Severus? Had you not found the unicorn, this interruption would have displeased me greatly." "Master," Severus said smoothly, "I reached Little Hangleton, as ordered, but Barty Crouch is here and has taken something of yours." At the name, Voldemort's form rippled. He turned to Barty with a sudden fury that made the younger man buckle to his knees, trembling. The instant Lord Voldemort manifested, Barty recognized the figure who had haunted his dreams. All his contempt and bravado dissolved. With tears streaking his face, he dropped to his knees and began to cry out to his master. A low, bestial roar exploded in his ear. "What did you find here?" Barty flinched so that his whole body jerked. He looked up, terror and bewilderment painted on his features. I, Master. "Tell me, Barty Crouch, what exactly did you find in this place?" Voldemort demanded, his quieter voice barbed with a fury that cut deeper. Barty babbled and pleaded, like a child facing abandonment. "A ring. I was searching for you, Master. I've always wanted to find you, to bring you back." Voldemort fell silent, cold and studying. Then, in a voice that had grown almost gentle, he asked, "And then, after you took the ring, what did you discover?" Severus watched from the shadows, arms folded. He knew this was Barty's last chance. If Barty lied, claimed he had noticed nothing of the ring, Voldemort, mindful of needing followers for his return, might spare him. But this Horcrux had not been entrusted to Barty. He had sought it on his own. Fanatical as he was, how could he lie to his master? Barty's voice trembled as he spoke, unable to hide his excitement and fear. On the ring, there was a part of you, master. It showed me things, gave me visions. I saw you take a golden cup from a witch. I saw you return to Hogwarts to seek a post. I saw you hide a locket in a seaside cave. And after seeing these visions, what did you do? Voldemort asked, the patience in his tone more terrifying than anger. I searched every place it showed. I tried to find the witch. I went to the cave and took the locket. I even went to Albania looking for you. He trailed off as a deathly hush fell. Severus understood in an instant. Barty had signed his own death warrant. No one needed to kill him. He had rushed to his doom by revealing what he had found. Finally, Voldemort asked, hollow and unhurried, "Where is the locket you found?" Without hesitation, Barty drew forth the locket he had taken from the cave with Roll's help. The ring and the locket lay side by side between Barty's trembling fingers. "I have always thought you a most promising young man, Barty," Voldemort said softly. "Clever, loyal, of the purest blood." Barty felt the undertone and trembled. When Voldemort addressed Severus, "Severus," Severus stepped forward and inclined his head. "Deal with him," Voldemort ordered. "Take the ring and the locket. Keep them safe. Let no one see. Let no one know." With that, the spirit withdrew into the teacup. Severus closed the lid and slid the cup away. He could feel the Dark Lord's strength ebbing. Until a unicorn was found, he would not linger outside his vessel. Barty sat like something emptied of life, his eyes vacant with the understanding of what the master's command meant. Severus bent and picked up the ring and the locket. The locket, at a glance, told him what he already suspected. It was a clever fake. The real Horcrux had been swapped long ago and hidden in the Black House. The ring, however, was undeniably genuine. Slipping the ring into his cloak, Severus looked down at the ruined man. "I told you not to seek death. Why force the issue?" Like a puppet with rusted joints, Barty lifted his head. "These two things are vital to the master, so important that no one must know. Even a hint endangers him, doesn't it?" Severus shrugged. "You see, you worked it out." Barty's dead eyes bored into him. "Then what are you waiting for? The master ordered you to deal with me. Only my death is safe for him, so do it." He pleaded without fear, desperate as a moth flinging itself against a flame. "Go on, kill me, and you know too, you'll have to die as well." Severus's lips curled. "Had I not met Dumbledore today, I'd have killed you without a qualm. But the old man prizes the purity of my soul." "You can die by a Dementor's kiss instead," Barty rasped, clinging to any last hope of a doom that would at least be swift. Severus did not answer. A jet of blinding red light filled Barty's world as Severus cast the stunning spell, Stupefy, and the man slumped, unconscious, to the floor. 243. Gamble. After spending the night at the Weasleys, Draco did not go straight home the next morning. Remus Lupin brought him and Harry to Hogwarts first, and only after they had spent half the morning there did he arrange for Draco to be returned to the Malfoy household. Though he would never admit it aloud, Draco was no longer as single-minded about racing home to find his parents as he had been when he first set out with Severus. Traveling with Severus and the others had not transformed him completely, but it had knocked some of his worst habits out of him. When Draco finally arrived, Narcissa came hurrying down the stairs, her face full of relieved surprise, and seized him in a tight embrace. "Oh my boy, I never thought you'd be away so long." She was trembling with tears as she spoke. "I'm so glad you're safe. You have no idea how worried your father and I have been." Draco returned her hug, pleased but suddenly self-conscious. He could almost hear Harry's teasing tone in his head. Little baby Draco. He pushed away quickly. "I'm fine, Mother. Don't fuss. I'm not a baby who needs someone watching over him every minute." Narcissa wiped her eyes but still gripped his shoulders, scanning him for bruises. "You're only 9. What else are you, if not a child? Did Snape mistreat you? Did that boy, what's his name, hit you?" "My name is Malfoy," Draco snapped, reverting to old habits. "They wouldn't dare bully me. 10 times the courage, 100 times, still wouldn't be enough." Narcissa knew her son well. "Then tell me, where did Snape take you?" At the mention of Severus, Draco's face lit up. He launched into a breathless account of everything he'd seen since leaving Britain with Severus, Harry, and Lupin. He did not spare any of the excitement. How he'd helped defend a pureblood's wife during the goblin attack at the French Ministry of Magic, how he'd hauled a skull out of a troll camp in Albania, and finally how they had found the legendary Fountain of Good Luck, only to discover the spring was cursed. The more animated he became, the paler Narcissa grew, her hand tightened on his arm. By the time he finished, fear had replaced her joy. He went too far, Narcissa cried. He actually took 2 children into places that dangerous. He was careful, Draco protested. Whenever it was dangerous, he handled it himself. Lupin watched us. He never put us in real danger. That's not the point. You're 9. 9. This is absurd. Draco had no answer. He looked around the drawing room, desperate for a change of subject. Where's father? Where did he go? Narcissa's anger evaporated into a sudden silence. After a few seconds, she smoothed his hair and, trying to sound casual, said, "He's out on business. He'll be back when it's settled." Lucius Malfoy, meanwhile, was caught in an altogether different kind of turmoil. As a governor and major benefactor of Hogwarts, he should have had no trouble confronting Albus Dumbledore. But Dumbledore was not merely a headmaster, and this visit had a purpose beyond petty school politics. "The Forbidden Forest is part of Hogwarts," Lucius told Dumbledore, tapping a finger on the desk while keeping his eyes carefully averted. "The Board of Governors has the right to inspect the forest and the expenditures related to its upkeep. So much school money goes to the gamekeeper and to protecting that place, yet we receive no reports. This is unacceptable." Dumbledore rested his hands on the desk and smiled. "If the governors request it, we can produce an annual report on the forest's expenditures, but I don't see why you needed to come in person, Lucius, over such a minor matter." "It's your lax management that's the problem," Lucius snapped. "The students are undisciplined. When I arrived today, there were 2 red-haired boys hurling dung bombs in the corridor." "That would be the Weasley twins," Dumbledore said lightly. "Thank you for reporting it. I will speak to Mr. Filch, though in less than 2 months they have already had 3 detentions." Lucius pressed on. "A report is not enough. The board must send a specialist into the Forbidden Forest to inspect it." He had been circling the real reason for his visit for some time. Now he laid it out plainly. In the past, he had been able to hound Dumbledore with impunity. Then the Dark Lord was thought dead, and Lucius's influence as a wealthy governor could be asserted without fear. Now, the balance had shifted. He felt exposed, uneasy. He had set the demand down as if it were indignation, but inside he trembled. Dumbledore listened then with a small, enigmatic smile, said something entirely unexpected. "I saw your son this morning, Lucius." The words struck like a thrown stone. Lucius stiffened and then leaped to his feet. "Draco, where is he now? Is he here with you?" Dumbledore spread his hands in a gentle little gesture. "Don't be so alarmed. Do you take my school for a criminal den of child kidnappers?" He chuckled at his own joke. "Remus brought him and another boy to see me, and we had a chat. He is very good," Dumbledore went on. "Stronger than most children of pureblood families I have known. You should be proud of your upbringing." Lucius did not sit. He stared at Dumbledore, unsure whether the praise was sincere or barbed. Dumbledore's smile faded into something softer. "Since you care so much for him and for your family, why don't you sit? We should have a proper talk." Lucius sank back into his chair, the room suddenly full of questions. "What is it you want to talk about?" Dumbledore asked a question that cut deeper than any complaint about school governance. "What do you think of your life now?" Lucius bristled. "My life, it is incomparable. The Malfoys have a long history, wealth, and social standing. Who could live better than I?" "Of course," Dumbledore agreed. "You are comfortable, respected, your family is secure. It is the life most people would envy." "But suppose one day someone approached you with a gamble," Dumbledore said, leaning forward. "A gamble in which you must stake everything, the Malfoy name, those you love, everything you possess. If you lose it all. If you win, life barely improves because you are already in the top 1% of wizards." He looked Lucius in the eye. "Would you make that bet?" Lucius let out a short, bitter laugh. "Do you take me for a fool?" "Even a fool wouldn't make such a bet," Dumbledore said. "So why make a choice worse than a fool's?" Lucius felt a coldness spread through him as the implication settled. Dumbledore's next sentence landed like a blow. A friend of yours told me that although you have done wrong, you are not beyond redemption. You care for your family. You still have a week, Dumbledore continued. Take that time to go home and speak with your son and your wife. Consider whether you can agree to such a gamble. Lucius left Hogwarts in a daze. Inside his head, the world had shattered into 1,000 fragments. How could Dumbledore possibly know? How could he know about the Dark Lord's return, the impossible deadline, the mission to obtain unicorn blood within a week? That knowledge had been shared only among the men in his drawing room. Who had told Dumbledore? Who was the mole? A dozen faces ran through his mind. Any one of them could have betrayed them. He briefly fixated on a particular name, then dismissed it in horror. The Master trusted that person. He had done so much for the Master. Anyone might turn traitor, even Barty Crouch, but surely not him. At home, Lucius was distant and distracted. Narcissa, alarmed, pressed him for answers, but he would not reveal what he had learned. He locked himself in his study to think, to force calm, and to plan. Dumbledore knew. There was a mole among the Death Eaters. The task to secure unicorn blood in a week was impossible. How would he explain failure to the Dark Lord? And even if he should attempt to succeed, was he prepared to stake everything, the family, his wife, and son, on a wager with such ruinous odds? He sat in the study all night, turning the questions over and over, but by dawn, he still had no answers. What kind of choice do you think Lucius will make? In the headmaster's office, Dumbledore asked Severus softly. Severus set the teacup in his hand down on the desk. Nicholas had tinkered with it earlier that day. It now felt weightless, lighter than a feather. From what I know of him, Severus said, he lacks the boldness to defy Lord Voldemort, especially when his wife and child's safety is at stake. But at the same time, Dumbledore pressed, he must realize that with the information you currently have, there is no way he can complete the task Voldemort set him within a week. So, in the end, I expect he'll pack quickly and flee Britain with his family, probably out of Europe, Severus continued. He flicked his wand. The teacup became transparent and invisible, weightless and colorless. Unless someone touched it, no one would notice its existence. Nicholas modified it wonderfully. Once those Death Eaters are taken care of, we can head to the United States to make preparations. Severus removed the disillusionment charm. The cup returned to its ordinary form. Dumbledore flipped through letters on his desk and said, "This is entrapment." Severus shrugged. The wizarding world never outlawed entrapment, did it? By the time Nott contacts them and they try to break into Azkaban, Kingsley will be waiting on that island to catch them red-handed. Dumbledore, for his part, seemed unconcerned about any procedural niceties. He had been in unusually good spirits lately, better than at almost any time in the past 20 or 30 years. Severus had already devised solutions for every problem and was about to execute them. This had been the most worry-free month Dumbledore had experienced in ages. "When do you think they'll move?" Dumbledore asked. "Voldemort gave Lucius 1 week to find the unicorn. Nott and the others won't wait longer than that." Severus chuckled lightly. "Perhaps they are gathered now, plotting." At the Nott residence, old Nott had summoned everyone but Lucius. Since parting with Severus in Diagon Alley, he had been contacting the Carrows, the Selwyns, the Goyles, and other pureblood houses. The idea of a raid on Azkaban tempted them all, but the prison's reputation made them cautious. That night, old Nott had called a meeting to press the matter. "Azkaban may seem indestructible," he declared, "but those who attempted rescues in the past did not have the connections and power we do now." A younger man spoke up, anxious. "Azkaban is different. No one has escaped on a scale like that before." "Sirius Black escaped," old Nott snapped back, "and Barty Crouch Jr. escaped. His whereabouts were unknown for a long while. We must not be cowed by legend." Old Nott, despite his age, showed none of the conservatism one might expect. "If you won't even think it, then don't call yourselves our supporters. We have many inside contacts in the ministry, people who served during our master's prime and volunteered to be our eyes and ears," he went on. "Now that our master has returned, we can reconnect. Individually, they may not be powerful, but together, they can do it." Those who had been brought along recently by the Caros or who had only recently realigned to the Master were the first to rise. This is an order from the Master. It's not something to hesitate over. If he wants this done, we should be discussing how, not whether. Right, another agreed. The Master has just returned. We cannot be seen doing nothing while Snape and Malfoy carry out tasks. We must break into Azkaban. With our ministry connections, the chance of success is high. Since the Master is making this plan, he intends to announce his return to everyone. We will be his vanguard. We will gain the most merit. Their eagerness spread. After Severus had welcomed Voldemort back, it had seemed that only Lucius and Severus could act. Yet now these families wanted to prove themselves. Still, not everyone was unthinking. If this fails, Selwyn asked, cautious, most of us are prominent. If we are exposed, our reputations will be ruined. How will we explain ourselves to the Master? Old Knot left the room and returned wearing an old iron mask, clearly well-maintained despite its age. 8 years, he said, as he replaced it. You didn't throw this away. If we face danger on this trip to Azkaban, we will, of course, prioritize our safety, he added. But don't hesitate. This is an order from the Master. He won't ask our opinion. We either do it properly or we do nothing. That settled it. No one further opposed. They spent the night listing reliable ministry contacts and planning routes to Azkaban. The meeting ran into the early hours. They agreed their action could not occur later than the week given to Malfoy to handle the unicorn, but they decided 5 days would be enough. Choose only the most dependable people. 5 days is enough. 3 days later, Lucius was visibly emaciated. He had barely eaten, spending his days shut in his study. Narcissa asked him repeatedly what was wrong. He offered only vague reassurances that he would resolve everything. He had found no solution overnight, and extending the time to 3 days had changed little. As Voldemort's deadline approached and his nerves frayed, he was startled by Draco's return through the flue. "Where have you been?" Lucius's voice was sharper than usual. He knew the surface calm of the British wizarding world belied undercurrents. Old Knot's plan wasn't a secret to him. He had known of it for 2 days. He distrusted the whole scheme. There had to be a mole somewhere, and he did not want Draco wandering about. Draco looked startled. He had never seen his father so drawn. "I went to play with friends." "Goyle and Crabbe?" Lucius guessed, thinking of Draco's usual companions. Draco hesitated, then admitted shamefaced. "I went to the Weasleys, and to the Dursleys." "Dursley?" Lucius frowned. That was not a pure-blood name. "Dudley Dursley?" "He's Snape's student, Dudley Dursley," Draco said softly. "He can use magic. Snape taught him. We fought before. He hit me and I hit him, and later in Albania, he even became my lackey." Lucius knew his son well enough to see how strange this was. After only a month with Severus, Draco had changed. The Malfoy upbringing considered the Weasleys and anyone of obscure origin beneath them. Lucius's voice dropped. "Why not Goyle and Crabbe?" Draco sneered and began to boast in the way he always did. "I'm tired of them. Dudley and Ron are different. Country bumpkins. I tell them about the parties you take me to, and they've never seen anything like it. They think I'm brilliant." He went on, excited, describing gnomes in the garden, a ghoul in the Weasley's attic, fishing for plimpies, stories spilling out for 10 non-stop minutes. Halfway through, Draco realized he'd said too much and stopped, sheepish. Lucius simply patted his son's head. "Go find your mother." Draco shot out his tongue and ran upstairs. Lucius stood, grim determination settling over his features. He left the house without looking back. Half an hour later, he was in Dumbledore's office at Hogwarts, unexpected and urgent. Dumbledore looked surprised to see him. "I thought you wouldn't dare come to see me again." Lucius wasted no time. "They're planning a jailbreak at Azkaban," he said, breathless. "Help me. Send Narcissa and Draco away. Out of Britain, out of Europe, somewhere no one can find them, and guarantee their safety. If you do that, I'll be your undercover agent." The portraits on the wall, usually disdainful, were whispering in surprise. The smile left Dumbledore's face. He looked at Lucius evenly and said softly, "It seems you are even braver than your friend guessed." Taking a 2-day break to prepare the ending and then some extras. Xiaoshangzhou, Qinhan Han Sui Tang Ningming Zuo, 11 to 0203 Shanghai, 12 likes. After finishing off Old Voldy, how about some original plot? The whole Harry Potter world can't be just about dealing with old Voldy, right? For example, write about teaching, Harry's year starting school, or even the integration of the wizarding and muggle worlds. Xiaoshang Hanhan Suitang Ningjuo, reply, that would be great. I've always felt many fanfics that focus only on old Voldy are really boring. What's the point of fighting him? That guy has no class at all. It's meaningless to write a book for so long just to fight someone like that. Yun 11152, Guangdong. Ending so soon? I hope the extras are big and filling. Fang Yu. Wait, it's ending before the original story even begins? In a wizarding world without Voldemort, where Snape isn't sharp-tongued and there's no useless Lockhart, in that case, you should update another 1,000 chapters. 1,000 chapters for everyone. 1,000 wins. 11-3-12-50. The extras should be at least 200 chapters, right? Ah? So fast? Go to the app to interact with more book friends. 246. Once and for all, I know better than anyone what he is capable of and what kind of man he is. Lucius clenched his fists until his knuckles paled. I've already been branded with the dark mark. No matter where I run, I can never escape his control, so I have to stay. Dumbledore watched him in silence, studying the arrogant, opportunistic, short-sighted pureblood before him with a look that seemed to view him from another angle entirely. After a long pause, he finally spoke. If you know you cannot flee, then you must also understand what will happen to you if your role as a double agent is discovered. Lucius drew a slow breath. I understand. I'm prepared. I'm glad you've steeled yourself, Lucius. Dumbledore tapped the desk with his fingertips. So, what do you bring me this time? Lucius understood exactly what Dumbledore wanted. I don't know if your mole has already informed you, but there is a plan to break out of Azkaban. No, not just a plan. They have already set it in motion. Someone at the ministry has agreed to work with them from the inside, he continued. They'll help get people to Azkaban so those imprisoned there can escape the island. Dumbledore listened closely as Lucius spoke and asked, Do you know when they'll try it? The deadline the Dark Lord gave me to find fresh unicorn blood. They will move on that day. This is valuable intelligence, Lucius, Dumbledore said quietly. With what you've told me, I'll take care of it. Lucius's unease returned instantly. Even if you act, don't be too obvious. If the prison break fails, the Dark Lord will suspect an inside leak. He sees everything, and I'm not good at occlumency. Dumbledore's voice was calm. You will be kept safe. What about my wife and son? Lucius asked, urgent and nervous. Despite Dumbledore's solemn manner, Lucius still felt something was off. He had helped fuel the legend of Dumbledore as a brilliant, eccentric strategist, and he could not bring himself to believe the headmaster would be careless. Dumbledore considered for a long moment before replying. I will have people make arrangements for them. Since you have come to me, give me your trust, Lucius. I promise I will ensure your family is safe. That eased Lucius a little. Is there anything they need to prepare? What should they bring? For now, nothing. If you want to help, stay at home for the next few days, do nothing, contact no one, and wait for my word, Dumbledore said. One more thing I must remind you. The Dark Lord assigned me to find fresh unicorn blood. If I fail, I won't remain one of his inner circle. You needn't worry about that, Dumbledore interrupted. Remember what I said. Your only task now is to wait at home for my message. Dumbledore looked at him. Wait for me to make the first move. That will be enough. Lucius left Hogwarts, determined but shaken. As he walked away, Severus emerged from the deep shadow of the headmaster's office, watching his back. He was pushed to a corner and had to make a choice, Severus said, sitting in the chair Lucius had occupied. A decision like that is self-preservation. The penalty for it later should be lighter. Dumbledore shook his head. You still don't understand the Wizengamot. What Lucius said to me will be enough for those judges to forgive past transgressions. They won't pursue charges. Severus was skeptical. Legal proceedings in the wizarding world are rarely purely rational, especially when they come down to a vote. When someone who has done wrong suddenly does something great, people forgive and praise him. But when someone usually good slips once, the outcry can be relentless. Dumbledore regarded him. Your own reversal of reputation benefited from that same irrationality. Severus made no concession. It is a flaw in society. Have you spoken to Kingsley about Azkaban? He's the only competent Auror left, really. Severus's face grew serious. I told him to pick reliable, capable people, but that's not enough. After what happened at the Crouch's house, I don't think we can trust the Ministry completely on something this important. Dumbledore steepled his fingers. What do you propose? In addition to the Aurors Kingsley selects, Remus and I will go. If you agree, we should also give the students the day off and mobilize the 4 current deans, you, and some veterans from the old Order of the Phoenix. Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. That would be quite a sight. Minerva and the others will manage. Alastor is retired, but I could call on him if I swallow my pride. Your old friend Horace, he probably won't want to get involved. You know him. Of course I do, Severus said softly. I'll go speak to him myself in a moment. We must settle the situation at Azkaban once and for all. 247. Prison break. Why are there so many weirdos at the dock today? Is Halloween early? At Hartlepool Dock, Forrest, a sailor who had just come home from a run on a freighter, squinted toward the small pier. A cluster of figures in black robes and terrifying metal masks, like something children might wear on Halloween, were gathered around a handful of small boats, talking intently. Ignore them, his mate said. It's probably one of the Grassroots Club's strange fundraisers. They love attention. For Forrest and the other muggles, the weirdos were just a curiosity. For anyone in the wizarding world who recognized them, they were far more than that. Nott and his circle, fully prepared and heading to Azkaban that very night for a prison break. No one wanted to be left out. With Lord Voldemort's return, nobody doubted these men would be important again. Breaking into Azkaban was the kind of bold proof of loyalty that would secure them influence and leverage when the new order rose. And with so many prominent pureblood families involved, no one expected failure. Tonight, they would shatter the myth of an unbreakable prison. What really brings a wizard to Azkaban isn't the boat, someone explained curtly. It's the lantern. If you don't want to lose your broomsticks, take the lantern from your boat and hang it on the tip of your broom. Others will just follow the broom with the lantern through the mist and to Azkaban Island. The man giving orders was an active Auror, Selwyn. The reason an Auror was helping was simple. Selwyn was a pure-blood, one of those old families whose loyalties ran a different way. Acting on his directions, the Death Eaters hauled the lanterns from the boats and fastened them to their broom tips. Nott checked his pocket watch, cast a disdainful glance at the curious muggles lingering nearby, then barked, "Disperse them, don your disillusionment cloaks, prepare to move." Goyle and Crabbe raised their wands and cast the muggle-repelling charm. One by one, the nearby muggles suddenly remembered pressing errands and hurried away. Even those who passed the road beside the dock seemed to look right through the robed figures. With the path cleared, the group drew their low-quality disillusionment cloaks and mounted their brooms. The cloaks did not entirely erase their forms. Up close, you could still make out strange, distorted silhouettes in the air, but as night fell, that flaw would vanish. They took off as the sun dipped toward the horizon and headed out over the North Sea. After more than 2 hours, they entered the gray, clinging fog that Muggle vessels never penetrated. The lanterns brightened to a steady yellow, cutting a guiding line through the mist. About half an hour after that, the prison island resolved out of the gloom, a bleak mass of rock and battlements, and on it, drifting in the air, black-robed shapes, Dementors, gliding like a living shadow. "I'll remind you one last time," Nott said, voice low and hard. "None of us can produce a Patronus. We get people out by speed. We ride in, open the doors before the Dementors react, drop the extra brooms, and leave." He pointed to the castle. "The prisoners are in the dungeons below. You all should have studied the layout. We know where we're going." He laid out the rest with grim practicality. If anyone was caught by a Dementor, they were not to expect rescue. Use the memory charm on yourself to obliterate everything about the night, then claim you were under Imperius when the Aurors recovered you. The rest of them would try to get a name cleared later. A laugh cut through the briefing. "You're getting old, Nott," someone taunted. "We know the plan." "We're the first wave to announce the Master's return," another voice said. "Let's make it count." Wands were raised, and with a sickening flare, the sky above them lit with a massive dark mark. The Death Eaters leveled their brooms and plunged toward Azkaban. The Dementors noticed them then and wheeled, but the leading riders were already inside the castle by the time the creatures fully reacted. These pure bloods had had the leisure to cultivate useful vices. Broomstick racing was among them. Their skill paid off now as they threaded through the herd of Dementors, wheeled down into the prison, and followed memorized corridors to the dungeons. Doors were forced, wards and locks swept aside. The Dementors gave chase, a shadowy pursuit in their wake. In less than 5 minutes, the first wave reached the bottommost cells. The men confined there were the worst of the old guard, unrepentant Death Eaters captured by Aurors 8 years before. The dungeon, which had been a hollow, oppressive silence, exploded into sound. When the prisoners recognized the iron-masked figures in black robes swooping in on brooms, they answered the invasion with a reckless, fanatical cheer. 248. Tonight, Caro, not, you actually have the guts to come to Azkaban to rescue us? A sharp female voice rang out, Bella's sinister laughter echoing through the dungeon. This can't be your own doing. It definitely isn't. Who told you to do this? Who? Hearing that voice made Old Knot and the others shiver. Among the Death Eaters, Bella had always been unhinged, and a long stretch in Azkaban had twisted her further. It's the Master! The Master has returned. The Master sent us to rescue you. Ha ha! Her mad laughter raised the hairs on everyone's arms. Disheveled, Bella stepped out of her cell. Other prison doors clanged open as well. Rodolphus, Rabistan, Corbin, Gibbon, and more emerged. After so many years bound in those cells, these villains were finally free. Broomsticks and wands were shoved into their hands, and one by one the Death Eaters mounted their brooms, ready to flee the island. But just as the leaders in front were about to take off from the lowest level, everything changed. Countless blinding spells streaked in from outside. The prisoners couldn't react in time. None of them had expected so many witches and wizards on the island. Almost every spell found its mark. In a few heartbeats, 7 or 8 Death Eaters fell from their broomsticks, collapsing unconscious on the stone floor. At the entrance to the lowest level, more than a dozen figures stood revealed, and every one of them was a face the villains knew. Shacklebolt, Moody, Sprout, McGonagall, Flitwick, Slughorn. And when that tall, white-bearded man stepped forward against the light, all the Death Eaters stared in disbelief. Albus Dumbledore! Dumbledore looked at them with a cold, unreadable expression and said nothing. Behind him, a swarm of Dementors poured into the dungeon, sliding in over every ledge. With their only escape blocked by Dumbledore and company, the Dementors reacted in fury, ignoring the standoff and closing around the Death Eaters in the center. If we don't break out, staying here means waiting to be sucked dry. Charge! Bella seized command, launching herself on a broom with her wand raised toward the exit guarded by Dumbledore's group. But the others' morale crumbled when they saw Dumbledore. Unlike the lunatic Bella, most of them understood what kind of wizard stood before them. Short of their master appearing in person, none of them could face Dumbledore, much less the Dementors now closing in. Someone lipped off a broom, dropped his wand, and tried to surrender. A number of them clung to the same delusion they always had: surrender, claim under ministry review they were imperioed, and maybe be exonerated. Even if Dumbledore would accept their surrender, the enraged Dementors cared nothing for such distinctions. The black-robed creatures surged around the men who tried to give up, nearly engulfing them. And for those who, like Bella, tried a frontal assault against Dumbledore's line, there could be only one outcome. Years in Azkaban had left them spent. Merely staying conscious had been an ordeal, let alone casting strong magic. Facing a force led by Dumbledore himself, strong enough to have held against Voldemort, these escapees had no hope. Soon, not one of the Death Eaters who had been exultant at a prison break remained standing. The Dementors, after an initial frenzy that ended the lives of 4 or 5 with the kiss, began to restrain themselves, siphoning away emotions until their victims were too weak to resist. Old Knot clung to consciousness, his face ashen. He trembled and stared at Dumbledore, shrieking, "You knew all along! It's a trap! You set this up to lure us in! Who warned you?" Who? Dumbledore asked calmly, but he offered no answer and simply turned to leave the prison. The four Hogwarts heads of house with him lingered for a moment, their expressions edged with pity as they looked at the captured Death Eaters. Pity and nothing more. There was work to be done, and Kingsley would handle it. Kingsley and Moody, however, were not entirely satisfied. The prisoners' claims nagged at them. They said, "You know who," someone began. Dumbledore cut in gently, shaking his head. "Don't worry, they're bluffing. I can promise you this. You know who will never appear again. Never." His words eased the tension. Moody's magical eyes spun slowly as he grunted. "Seems there have been things we've been kept out of the loop on." "Not just things, many things," Dumbledore replied with a small smile. "But they are all good. Will we have a chance to know?" Kingsley asked. "That depends on whether a certain person is willing to speak," Dumbledore said. That night, almost all of the escaping Death Eaters were rounded up in one fell swoop. Dumbledore and his allies returned victorious. In other places, the evening moved at a different pace. Lucius paced anxiously at home. Tonight was the final deadline Voldemort had set for him to deliver fresh unicorn blood, and there had been no word, not from Dumbledore, not from the Dark Lord. Severus sat in the headmaster's office at Hogwarts, reading the newspaper and idly chatting with the portraits of former headmasters, calm as if nothing hung on the night's events. But in the late hours of that night, neither the ministry nor the press would sleep easily. 249. Dementor's Kiss. Only when every tremor inside Azkaban had finally died away did Kingsley file his full report with the Director of Magical Law Enforcement and with the Minister. To the Director, there was nothing to debate. She summoned every available Auror, those at home and those at the Ministry, and rushed to the prison. Minister Bagnold, however, was frayed to the edge. The recent chain of disasters had left her desperate for nothing more than to finish her term in peace and retire to a quiet life. Good news or bad, she wanted none of it. For 2 days, the papers had been hinting that Sirius Black's guilt might not be as certain as everyone had assumed, and the story was giving her a splitting headache. The Ministry's only interest was that Black be captured. Whether he had actually committed the crimes was secondary. If he proved innocent, the Ministry looked all the more incompetent. Worse, the whole affair felt disturbingly familiar, as if it were repeating something she had already endured. Bagnold was shrewder than her predecessor Fudge. She had taken over a shattered ministry at the height of Voldemort's power and would not bury her head in the sand if he had returned. All she could do was hope Dumbledore had seen and prepared for what might come. Inside the ministry, preparations began. In the press, reporters spent a sleepless night. They could not enter Azkaban, so they pestered every ministry employee for the smallest scrap of news. Before leaving for the prison, Bagnold quietly ordered a controlled leak, suggests that the Death Eaters' mass movement might be linked to the vanished Dark Lord. The truth would surface anyway. Better to let the public brace itself for the possibility that the man who once terrorized the magical world had never truly gone. At the prison, Dumbledore's intervention, if he had indeed seen the Death Eaters plotting a break and arranged for them to be rounded up, had prevented something far worse. Whether that counted as good or bad for Bagnold was another matter. The involvement of Old Knot and other powerful pureblood families sent a clear message. Would they risk such an exposed attempt unless the Dark Lord had returned? The question alone was incendiary. When Bagnold finally stood in Azkaban facing the captured raiders, even half drained by the Dementors, they screamed and swore. They insisted they had been under the Imperious Curse and had not meant to storm the prison. Bellatrix and the Lestranges hurled curses and promised that their master would return and free them, after which the magical world would be theirs. Bagnold watched them coldly until she was certain who had been involved. Then she turned away from the lowest dungeon. Remove everyone involved in tonight's break-in from the island to await trial before the Wizengamot, she ordered. Her voice was icy. Whoever had seen her in earlier heated moments would have recognized how low and hard it had become. As for Bellatrix and the Lestranges, sentenced to life yet unrepentant and eager still to serve darkness, initiate proceedings. Let the Dementors give them the kiss. The words fell like a stone. Peace had lasted so long that many had forgotten that, Though Bagnold had grown from a fiery young witch into a seasoned politician, her ruthlessness toward Death Eaters had never cooled. The sky was paling. Dawn approached. Kingsley, exhausted from the night's work, hurried up to report. Bagnold waved him off, brow drawn. She had a single, sharp question. Have Dumbledore and those with him heard them say the Dark Lord has returned and that he ordered this prison break? She demanded. Kingsley hesitated. Dumbledore had not asked him to keep anything secret, so he told the minister what the headmaster had told him, that they need never fear Voldemort again. Bagnold's eyes flashed. She seized his sleeve. He truly said that? She breathed. Several aurors confirmed they had heard the same. Once their words convinced her, Bagnold grew agitated, half relieved, half uncertain. Anyone who knew Dumbledore knew the old man could seem frivolous. Yet when it mattered most, he was deadly serious. If she was to know the truth, she would have to confront him at Hogwarts. She could not remain at Azkaban another moment. Everything here was under control. She returned to England at once and stepped through the flue to the castle. At Hogwarts, however, she found Dumbledore gone. Professor McGonagall received her. Professor Dumbledore left early this morning with Professor Snape, McGonagall said. They have business abroad and will be away for some time. Bagnold wanted to scream. How could Dumbledore vanish at such a moment? Did they say when they will be back? She demanded. McGonagall shook her head. He promised to return before Halloween. Before he left, he told me that, should you come, I should introduce you to certain people. Bagnold looked up sharply. To whom? McGonagall led her to an unused sitting room in the castle. When the door opened, Bagnold saw two men and a huge black dog. Bagnold stared, clearly shaken, when she saw Lupin, Peter Pettigrew, and Sirius Black in the room. What's going on? Who are they? Peter Pettigrew? Didn't he die years ago? Her mind raced as she remembered the rumors that had been all over the papers the last few days. Did you spread those stories? Are you trying to clear Black? McGonagall did not leave after bringing them in. Dumbledore had apparently left her in charge of the matter concerning Black and Pettigrew. Lupin, standing before McGonagall and the minister, stepped forward and began to recount in detail what had happened that year. Meanwhile, on another continent, across the Atlantic from Britain, the sun rose over Merritt Island on Florida's east coast. NASA's primary launch complex sat there. Most of the island was restricted, with only a small visitor center and a wildlife refuge open to the public. Early that morning, 3 people of very different ages, old, middle-aged, and young, who clearly were not staff at the complex, strolled across the site as if they belonged there. Professor, why are we here? Harry had held the question in during the journey, but could not resist asking once they reached their destination. Severus watched the busy Americans with obvious interest. Beside the enormous launch pad, the space shuttle Atlantis stood ready. Final preparations had been completed, and it could go at any moment. Severus answered quietly, to say goodbye to an old acquaintance. An old acquaintance? Harry frowned. Dumbledore, not in robes, but in a suit no wizard would typically wear. He looked like an elderly Muggle gentleman, smiled. Don't be nervous, Harry. Think of this as a special event. Today we are going to watch a great machine fly. Harry glanced from Dumbledore to Severus, unable to understand why they had brought him. It was clear they had agreed he wasn't to be told the whole truth yet. Dumbledore waved toward the crowd, and a middle-aged man in a suit and tie, who looked more like an official than a researcher, came over. He blinked as he recognized Dumbledore, then put an affectionate arm around his shoulder as if greeting an old friend. Smith, it's been too long. Aren't you supposed to be running for office again? How do you have time to get out here? Dumbledore chuckled. You're undertaking a major federal project. I felt I should see it for myself. Aha! You always have more ideas than your rivals. This is a fantastic publicity move. The man in the suit leaned in and whispered, Honestly, I'm rooting for you. Even though you lost to George Bush, your public support is still strong. He paused, brow furrowing as if he'd forgotten something important. What was your approval rating this time? How could I forget? Dumbledore patted his shoulder, smiling. None of that matters now. What's important is that you lead us on a tour of what you're about to send into space. The man brightened at once. Right. Come on then. They're doing final checks. Launches are all about repetition to catch potential problems. They moved quickly. Led by the man in the suit, Severus and the others went down into the shuttle hangar, changed into dust-proof suits, passed through 3 security checks, and finally stepped into the cargo bay where the Galileo payload rested. Harry was dazzled by the compact, awe-inspiring instruments, the result of years of human ingenuity. "This is it," the man enthused. "Humanity's cutting-edge instrument for exploring Jupiter, the Galileo." Dumbledore gave them a quiet, practical warning. "Rest for a moment. It will only take 5 minutes." He produced his wand and with a soft word cast a spell. The officials' faces went blank for a heartbeat. Harry's eyes widened. Severus shrugged as if to say there was nothing to be alarmed about. Then Severus took out the teacup Flamel had improved, the lid sealed perfectly, and tapped it with his wand. Some alchemical matrix in the cup activated. It grew light, weightless, transparent. Under Dumbledore's direction, the teacup was tucked into the deepest recess of Galileo, hidden from sight. With that done, Dumbledore restored the officials' awareness and discreetly modified their memories with a memory charm about the odd interruption. Then the 3 left the launch facility as if they had only been spectators. Harry was bewildered by what he had witnessed, but one thing was clear. His world had widened that day. They didn't leave Florida immediately. Instead, they stayed by the coast among a crowd of astronomy enthusiasts, ate hot dogs, and waited for the launch. People around them argued excitedly about what the Galileo mission would mean for space exploration. Harry watched, fascinated, and finally asked Severus, "Do you think wizards will go into space someday?" Severus paused with a hot dog halfway to his mouth and then laughed. "Forget someday. Today, Harry, you're about to see the first wizard cross into space. Well, at least a wizard-made object. It will travel all the way to Jupiter." Harry stared, puzzled, and looked to Dumbledore for explanation. Dumbledore only watched the shuttle and said softly, "If you're truly interested in the universe, Harry, you could study magic in that direction in the future. But if you ever go," Severus added, smirking, "don't travel alone. Take a partner. Draco or Ron would do." At the thought of Draco and Ron as astronauts, a grin tugged at Harry's mouth. They were finishing their lunch when the crowd surged. At 12:52 p.m. Eastern, the countdown reached its final seconds. Severus, Harry, and Dumbledore watched the shuttle at the pad. 10 seconds later, the engines ignited in a plume of flame, and the shuttle rose, roaring, into the sky. The crowd erupted in cheers. Severus squinted up at the shuttle, climbing higher, and shouted over the noise, "Say goodbye, Harry." Caught up in the excitement, Harry flushed and shouted back, "What? Say goodbye? To whom?" "The shuttle. To your original future." Harry didn't understand, but he waved and called out to the shrinking speck of the shuttle anyway. "Goodbye." Others nearby heard him and, thinking it a spontaneous salute, began to wave as well. "Goodbye," they shouted, until the shuttle became just another star. Dumbledore watched the sky quietly, then turned to Severus. "If we've said goodbye to the original future, we ought to have time to talk properly now. Don't you think?" Severus shrugged. "You wouldn't discard me once I've served my purpose, would you?" Dumbledore smiled. "Since we've said goodbye to the old future, perhaps now we can discuss your past and your brand new future." They stood there as the shuttle arced away, the day full of possibility and things left unspoken. The 3 of them facing a future that had been altered by a small, hidden teacup and a choice to change direction. 251. The main story is finished. Let's also briefly talk about what comes next. Honestly, I don't understand why some people say I've abandoned the book or given it a bad ending. I said long ago that the main story would end once Lord Voldemort was dealt with. That was always the plan. Ending the main arc doesn't mean the book is over. As for claims that I started strong and then tapered off, I admitted that myself once the work went premium. Except for the volume about Grip, I agree the later plot was only average. The Grip volume was written just for fun. At first, I didn't even think of this as a Harry Potter fanfic. After that volume did well, I felt I should take things more seriously, set up a main plot, and bring in Lord Voldemort, and so on. The result was that the accidental masterpiece became less so once I started planning and changing my approach. So I made a decision: finish the Lord Voldemort arc quickly, conclude the main story, then go back to the freer first volume style and write side stories as extras. I haven't dropped the story or given it a bad ending. First, I've closed the major plot holes. Voldemort was handled exactly as I intended, with no dangling threads or deliberate foreshadowing left. Second, the main story has a clear beginning and end. This book is essentially two stories, the first part about Grip and the second about Lord Voldemort. Now the Voldemort story is complete. Third, I never said I would stop writing. Tonight I'll release the first extra chapter. I said long ago there would be at least 100,000 more words in extras. I downplayed the length of those extras earlier because I worried readers would expect an epic continuation. For now, the extras are planned as two stories. One is about Black and his younger brother, set before Harry starts school. The other covers the period after Harry enters Hogwarts. I plan to update the extras roughly every day or every other day, aiming to finish them before Chinese New Year's Eve. I promised readers on my alternate account that I'd get back to original writing before the end of the year, and I take my reputation seriously, so I'm very sensitive to accusations of dropping a story. As for the exact length of the extras, that's still to be decided. I think this book could host many small stories indefinitely. Even after these two extras are done, if I have little ideas later, I can come back and write short pieces from Severus's or Harry's perspectives just for fun. The first extra chapter will be out tonight, before midnight. 252. Extra 1, Minister of Magic. Millicent Bagnold announced that Aurors were public protectors, not useless insects in league with dark wizards. No matter how Knot, Crabbe, Selwyn, Goyle, and the rest tried to blame the Imperious curse in court, the Wizengamot would no longer listen. They were sentenced to life in Azkaban. An astonishing reversal followed immediately after the verdict. The criminals who had rushed in to stage a breakout suddenly changed their tune. They offered to betray their accomplices to the Chief Justice in exchange for leniency. But the men they named, Severus Snape and Lucius Malfoy, had double guarantees from Dumbledore and Auror Kingsley Shacklebolt. It was shown in court that Severus and Lucius's undercover cooperation had allowed Dumbledore to assemble the Aurors and capture the whole gang in one sweep. When Knot had accused in court that you-know-who had returned and that Severus Snape himself had brought him back, Severus immediately exposed the claim as a ruse. Dumbledore confirmed at the trial that all rumors of the Dark Lord's return were false, that you-know-who had died 8 years ago. More than the Azkaban escape or the trial itself, people would talk about Dumbledore's unexpected, firm public declaration. He had been silent about the Dark Lord for years, and his answer now carried weight. With that trial concluded, Sirius Black's case was re-examined. Peter Pettigrew, long thought dead after his supposed sacrifice 8 years earlier. The truth came out. Sirius was exonerated, and Peter was sent to Azkaban. In her speech, Minister Bagnold declared that with these remnants of the Death Eaters rooted and the wrongs righted, the last traces of you-know-who's influence in Britain were finally gone, and the public would no longer live in fear. Facing impeachment by the Wizengamot Ethics Committee for her unauthorized execution of Bellatrix Lestrange and others attempting escape from Azkaban, Bagnold nonetheless announced she was willing to resign the ministry in advance. Severus flipped through the newspapers on Dumbledore's desk, found the headlines predictably familiar, and tossed a sheet back with casual disinterest. After returning from the United States, a major trial had erupted. Not only were Knot and his associates headed to Azkaban, but the Black and Pettigrew cases had been reopened. Lupin, true to his word in Albania, had gone home to see his father and had taken Harry with him, which left Severus free to remain in Britain for a while. He was about to rummage through Dumbledore's drawers for hidden snacks when a ghost glided into the headmaster's office. Ghosts made no sound, and the cold, inflexible expression on his spectral face made Severus jump in the middle of his pilfering. "Could you be a little more polite and say something when you come in?" Severus complained. "And don't go scaring the students with that expression. It'll be a nuisance if word gets out that Severus Snape suddenly died, possibly from you-know-who's curse." The ghost of Severus regarded him without expression. "Didn't you say it yourself? Those who do no evil fear no ghost at their door." Severus snorted. It's those with a clear conscience fear no knocking at the door by ghosts. Besides, you didn't even knock. He produced a slice of strawberry cake, flicked his wand and turned it into a spoon, and grumbled as he ate. After they had settled the plan to deal with the Dark Lord, Severus had seized an opportunity. With an odd little charm and a teacup, he had drawn his past, spectral self free of his own mind and released it into the world. It meant he no longer had a living, intrusive presence constantly peering into his privacy. Ghost Snape could not appear publicly without causing problems, of course, so Dumbledore and Severus had agreed to invent an explanation later, that Severus had developed a new soul-targeting charm and created a private, unique ghost of his former self. Watching Severus eat as if no one else were there, the ghost hesitated, then asked, "What did you and Dumbledore speak about that day in this office?" Severus rolled his eyes. "I knew you'd ask. Your curiosity could be employed elsewhere. We didn't talk about much, only trivialities." "Don't try to fool me," the ghost said sharply. "You told him about your origins." Severus shrugged and stayed silent. Before the ghost could press further, Dumbledore reappeared in the doorway. "Far too many people have been coming to the school to see me recently," the white-bearded man muttered, then smiled when he saw Severus innocently spooning cake. "Very well. Let us resume what we left unfinished." He settled into his chair. "I have managed to destroy all the Horcruxes you gave me," Dumbledore said, "but that locket was a fake." "The real locket was hidden by a young man who once followed the Dark Lord," Severus replied after swallowing the last of his cake. "You know where it is hidden," Dumbledore observed. It was half a question, half a realization. He had suspected as much since their last conversation. "To retrieve the real locket, that Black must be brought back to his old home," Severus said. "The Horcrux was hidden in the family house by his younger brother, the one whom he had once despised, and he ordered the house elf to hide it there." 253, Extra 2. "If you're free for a while, could you go see someone for me as an extra favor?" Dumbledore asked. Severus rose from his chair. "If it's boring, don't bother. If it's interesting, I might take a look." Dumbledore already had a letter in hand. He pulled it from the pile on his desk and pushed it toward Severus. "It's about the Prewett family." Severus took the letter, frowning. He wasn't unfamiliar with the Prewetts, especially with the ghost of Snape at his side. "Molly Weasley's family? Arthur's wife?" "Yes," Dumbledore said softly. "But the Prewetts are essentially out of male heirs. Molly's brothers, Fabian and Gideon, were ambushed and killed by Death Eaters years ago." "Who carries the family now? I thought the Weasleys mentioned a great-aunt Muriel." Severus muttered as he opened the letter to read its blunt scrawl. "You must send someone to handle this. Dumbledore, both my brothers died under your command. That girl's condition is getting worse. Lately she clutches a wooden stick, saying it's her parents' heirloom. She's nearly mad. Although her surname isn't Prewett, she's the only one I can name as a potential heir. If you remember my brother's service, send someone to see her at once. Muriel Prewett." Severus's confusion deepened as he finished reading. "What exactly is this about?" Dumbledore sighed. "As you can see, there are no male Prewetts left. Molly married Arthur. Her elder sister Muriel never married and has been keeping the Prewett ancestral home. She needed an heir, so a few years ago she chose a suitable candidate." He handed Severus a photograph. "Melia Foley. She's part Prewett. If you remember her, she came into Hogwarts 2 years after you, in Ravenclaw. 1/4 Prewett. Her paternal grandmother was a Prewett, Molly and Muriel's aunt." Dumbledore continued. 8 years ago, her parents were involved with the Death Eaters for a time. Later, frightened by Lord Voldemort's volatility, they told Melia they wanted to leave Britain. Not long after, they vanished. Many believe Voldemort had them killed. A child in that situation without a chance to resign from Voldemort's service." Severus listened. "And Melia? Since then, her mind has been fragile. She confuses things, talks to herself, withdraws for long stretches. Muriel took an interest in her and named her a possible heir, but recently her condition has worsened." Dumbledore shook his head. "St. Mungo's has examined her repeatedly. Most healers say she suffered a severe shock, trauma affecting her memory. It's akin to the Longbottom's case, though somewhat less severe. Melia still manages basic self-care and at times is aware of what she's doing." You are skilled in occlumency and legilimency, Dumbledore said, meeting Severus's eyes. Perhaps you could see her, quietly, and assess whether you can help. Severus scanned the photograph once more before shrugging. I can go take a look. I'll only promise a look. I can't guarantee anything. For those who do their best, no grand promises are necessary. Dumbledore offered a small smile. Severus pocketed the letter and photograph and left the headmaster's office. The ghost of Snape did not follow. Since leaving Severus's body, the ghost had been staying at Hogwarts and planned to return to his old home later. He put the letter and photograph away and went into Hogsmeade. As usual, he found the large black dog by a trash can on the street, Sirius Black, whose name had finally been cleared. Severus knelt and reached to stroke the dog's head. Sirius shook Severus's hand off with a grumpy snort. I'm a free man now, Sirius protested. I'll go where I please. No one can tell me otherwise. Severus's voice was dry. I know what you're thinking. Your name's cleared. Peter has been given the Dementor's kiss, and Dumbledore says Voldemort is gone for good. Everything fell into place so cleanly, you don't know what to do with yourself, do you? Sirius's irritation showed, but so did a flicker of ruefulness. If you're bored, go bother someone else. Leave me alone. That won't work this time. Severus stood, calm. I need you to take me to the Black Ancestral Home to fetch something. It concerns Lord Voldemort. The mention of Voldemort snapped Sirius to attention. He stopped trying to shoo Severus away and looked at him properly. But he's gone. He can't come back, right? Don't worry. Dumbledore wouldn't say it if he didn't mean it. Voldemort can't return. But there are still things he left behind that need dealing with. Severus patted his robes. It's not yet noon. We'll fetch the item from your house, and we might even be able to stop by the Grangers for lunch. What could he possibly have at my house? Sirius demanded. Rather than ask now, let's go to your house first. Sirius rose reluctantly, let Severus take one of his paws, and together they apparated away from Hogsmeade. 254, Extra 3 London, number 12, Grimmauld Place. The old Black family mansion sat hidden on that tidy, cramped street. It was not yet being used as the Order of the Phoenix's secret headquarters, and might never be, so although it was concealed from Muggles, no Fidelius charm had been placed upon it. You've never been back here before? Severus asked as they reached the front door. Sirius sniffed coldly. I don't think this is a place worth reminiscing about. He added, with the instinctive sting of his old habit, on the other hand, the younger version of you might have liked it, a house full of people who shared your principles. Severus said nothing. He pushed the door open. They stepped into a hallway, almost entirely swallowed by shadow. The air inside smelled damp and dusty, with a cloying sweetness of decay beneath it. The house felt abandoned, yet everything was unnervingly tidy, not a speck of dirt on the floor. A row of old-fashioned gas lamps along the wall guttered and swayed, throwing an unreal, wavering light over peeling wallpaper and a threadbare carpet that ran the length of the corridor. A cobweb-matted chandelier overhead gave off a faint, stubborn glow. Portraits blackened with age hung at crooked angles on the walls. Just as Sirius moved to lead them further inside, the old rug at his feet whipped up like a sheet caught by a gust of wind. It lunged for him, tightened, and wrapped around his body. At the same instant, a coat rack near Severus shuddered and lurched as if trying to spring to life. Severus let his wand slide out and tapped the rack lightly. It stopped, clattered to the floor, and lay still. Sirius was not so lucky. He was pinned midair, his shouts high and enraged, amplified by the thin, shrill speaker at his collar. Creature! I know it's you! What are you doing? You're attacking your only master. Beneath one of the gas lamps, a small figure had materialized. Its skin was wrinkled and orange-brown, puckered like a rotten fruit. Its face was all narrow nostrils and hard lines, radiating a mixture of hatred and disgust. Trespassing thieves, it cried. Creature has no master anymore. Creature's last master went to Azkaban for serving the one who was worthy, and Creature will not let thieves into this house. The house elf's voice was a shriek of fury. Sirius, more exasperated than afraid, snapped back. Do you think I've joined them? You'd believe everyone on the news before you'd believe me, wouldn't you? Creature, let me down. You can't mistake me. I order you, as your master, now. The house elf trembled at his words. Its round eyes darted. Finally, it poked a finger, slackened the rug, and Sirius fell to the floor. He was furious, glaring at Creature with eyes that were almost canine in their intensity. Creature, meanwhile, refused to meet his gaze and muttered on in a low, frog-like croak as it turned toward the carpet. "My poor mistress," it said, half to itself, half to the house. "If she knew I let such a dog into the black house, how would she reproach Creature? What a disgrace! But what could Creature do?" "Don't think I can't hear you," Sirius barked then, having exhausted that avenue, abandoned any pretense at diplomacy, and turned to Severus. "If there's anything to find here, let's find it quickly. No one wants to linger." Severus stepped forward. He watched the house elf, small, ugly, its features carved by age and bitterness. Creature, meanwhile, continued to mutter to the carpets and portraits, railing about the prodigal son and his mistress. Sirius waved his hand impatiently. "Ignore him. His mind's not right, or then again, that's how house elves are. We're here on business, not to argue." "The business we came for," Severus said quietly, "is about this house elf." Creature's bulbous eyes swung to him. It did not know this man, but it seized upon Sirius's presence to vent its fury, preparing a fresh tirade. Before it could begin, Severus rolled up his sleeve and revealed the dark mark on his forearm. At the sight of it, Sirius's expression soured into disgust. Creature froze as if struck. Its eyes went wide and glassy, nearly popping from their sockets. The house elf's mouth worked. It was the mark it had seen before, the same sign the master it had served had worn. "You served a master with that," Severus said softly, watching the effect. "You went with him to fetch something for his master. You brought it back with you." Creature collapsed inward, clawing at its own face, shrinking into itself. Even Sirius fell silent. Severus looked steadily at the trembling creature. "Can you bring out the thing Regulus found with him?" he asked. Not only was Creature stunned by Severus's words, Sirius beside him froze as well. Wait, you said you got that from," Sirius began. "How do you know?" Creature shrieked, cutting him off. The elf looked as if the world had collapsed around him. "No, Creature doesn't know. Creature doesn't know what you mean." He flailed for a moment, frantic in denial, but by now pretending ignorance was useless. Severus's voice was calm. "You took him to the sea cave, didn't you? Voldemort's thing was hidden there. You knew from the start, and you were the one who led Regulus there." Creature's eyes went wide. He stared at Severus in horror, then clutched his head. "You wicked wizard! You're reading Creature's memories. You must be." "I'm not reading your memories, Creature. Look at this." Severus produced the Slytherin locket, one of the fakes he'd taken from Barty, and held it up. Through his fingers, Creature saw the trinket. Tears the size of beans rolled down the elf's face. No, Master Regulus gave his life to hide it again in that place, and you've taken it. You've taken it." "Someone else retrieved it, hoping to bring back Voldemort," Severus said. "But the Dark Lord is finished. He can't threaten the magical world anymore. We need the real locket you and Regulus took from the cave so we can destroy it properly." "No, Creature won't tell a sneaking wizard," the elf hissed. "Creature will say nothing, especially not to the Dark Lord's servant. You know your master Regulus turned against Voldemort in the end, don't you? A true pureblood heir of Slytherin, he couldn't accept the Dark Lord's ways and chose to stop him." Severus rested a hand on the elf's narrow shoulder. His touch was firm but not cruel. He wasn't invading Creature's mind so much as using a small legilimency trick to steady the elf, calming his hysteria just enough to listen. Under that gentle pressure, Creature sobbed for a long time and then, at last, began to speak. "The drawing room, a cupboard that won't open. Creature hid it there." Severus turned immediately and strode for the Black's wide drawing room. Sirius, still reeling, stayed behind and stared at the trembling house elf. "Tell me everything. What happened? What you know." Creature resisted. "No, Creature mustn't tell Master Sirius. He hated Master Regulus. He'll believe nothing Creature says." "I order you, as your master, tell me," Sirius barked. As the last black heir, Creature had no choice. Eyes squeezed shut, the elf began the painful tale. Severus found the cupboard that wouldn't open. House elf magic sealed it, but Severus undid the charm with little trouble. Inside was the last Horcrux besides Harry's, Slytherin's locket. With it in his hand, there were no other Horcruxes at large. Nagini, the living Horcrux, had not yet been created. When Severus returned to the entrance hall, Creature had finished recounting how he and Regulus had betrayed Voldemort. Silence fell. Sirius, in his dog form, showed little outward expression, but shock lingered in his eyes. He had always clung to rigid ideas about his family and believed his brothers as die-hard pure-blood fanatics like their parents. When he'd heard Regulus might have been killed by Voldemort, Sirius had assumed Regulus had tried to quit the Death Eaters and had paid the price. If the story had come from anyone but the infallibly truthful house elf, Sirius might never have believed it. Even so, a gnawing doubt took hold, and alongside it, a tangle of other feelings he couldn't name. Severus waited, watching him. Sirius blinked as if shaking himself back to reality. Meeting Severus's steady gaze, he instinctively stepped back. We need to take this to Dumbledore," Severus said, ignoring the attempt to invoke Regulus's name. "Before Harry returns with Lupin, there's something else to do. Come with me if you're free." Sirius bristled. "Why should I go anywhere with you?" "Because I'll tell you everything about the choice your brother made." Severus turned toward the front door. "Is that reason enough?" Sirius watched him go, ground his teeth for a moment, and then hurried after him. Ottery St. Catchpole. Though a Muggle village, many wizarding families lived nearby. Besides the Weasleys, the Lovegoods and Diggorys, the Prewetts and the Follies had homes in the area. After dropping in on Granger for lunch, Severus apparated there with Sirius. Even now, Sirius was still turning over what Severus had said that morning, and the truth he'd forced from Creature. He couldn't name the sourness in his chest. It felt like dry bread stuck in his throat, neither swallowable nor spit out. If Creature had been telling the truth, and Severus knew he had been, why weren't they checking the proof at once? Sirius glared up at Severus. "We could go to that sea cave. If Regulus really died there, we'd find his body." "You want to clear your brother's name?" Severus asked quietly. "Let the world know the Blacks produced more than one blood traitor?" The words stung. Sirius shook his head, anger propelling him. "Of course not. He's dead, isn't he? I can't believe he actually did it. He worshipped the Dark Lord. More than anyone." Finding that excuse, he spoke with growing conviction. Severus simply watched. He could see the self-deception. Everyone knew house elves couldn't lie to their masters. However much Creature loathed Sirius and loved Regulus, he could not have invented such a tale. What truly gnawed at Sirius was that he did not know how to face himself. For years he'd scorned Regulus, until today, when he learned exactly what his despised brother had chosen and for whom he had died. He should repent, but his pride forbade a straight apology. Severus offered him a silent escape rather than forcing the wound open. "I should take you to that cave at once," he said, "but Dumbledore asked me to care for a patient who cannot wait." Sirius frowned. A patient? Severus led the way past the Muggle houses toward a wizarding homestead, a mind shattered by shock. He pressed the gate bell. An eagle-nosed, red-eyed woman in a pink-feathered hat, looking for all the world like a bad-tempered flamingo, soon appeared. "Well, if it isn't the famous Severus Snape." She reached the gate and sized them up with distaste, eyeing the dog at Severus's feet. "I never heard Hogwarts allowed professors to keep dogs." "I'm no longer a professor," Severus said with a small shrug. "Still Dumbledore's man, though. His reformed little order, eh? You're in it, otherwise things wouldn't tidy themselves so quickly." "Not Albus himself," she grunted as she unlatched the gate, "but with your reputation you'll do. I'm through with fuss." Severus made for business. "How is the girl?" "Worse," Muriel barked, leading them inside. The moment the door opened, a brown-haired, pale girl stood there like a puppet, her eyes empty. The sight startled the already wrought Sirius. His black's fur along his shoulders bristled. Severus recognized her at once. Milia Fawley. He offered his hand. "Hello, I'm Severus Snape," he said. Milia stared for a dozen seconds before she slid her hand into his. "Melia," she murmured. "She's slipping day by day. I wrote to Dumbledore in despair," Muriel rattled on. "A week ago she was fine, then something upset her. She locked herself away. When I forced the door, she was like this." Without ceremony, Severus drew his wand. "Did you find anything in there?" "Nothing, just reading the papers." "Newspapers?" "The ones about Azkaban's second breakout, those scum being rounded up again." Muriel snorted. Ever since the escapes, Milia had followed every column, buying the Daily Prophet and Witch Weekly. She had hardly spoken. Severus touched the tip of his wand to the girl's temple. A silver filament bridged them. He closed his eyes, not probing particular memories but scanning the mind itself. Moments later, he withdrew his wand. Her mind is fractured, thoughts chaotic. St. Mungo's healers said the same. Useless, Muriel snapped. Severus thought for a moment. I should fetch another specialist in the arts of the mind. He's just cleared his ministry paperwork. Do you know how busy I am right now? I have to travel to 3 different wizards' homes every day, working with the Ministry of Magic's Memory Obliviation Squad to restore their memories without harming their health. Lockhart complained. And the Daily Prophet keeps sending me letters, begging for an exclusive interview. Do they think I'm insane? I don't even dare go home. I'm living at the ministry for fear of the howlers my so-called fans keep sending me. He ran a hand through hair that was no longer meticulously groomed. Though he looked exhausted and haggard, Lockhart's tone was more light-hearted than his appearance suggested. I'm still getting used to life after my reputation was ruined, and it's all your fault, Severus Snape. Severus raised an eyebrow. At least you're not in prison. He spoke dryly. You ought to be grateful your victims could be restored. If even one of them had been left irreparably damaged by a memory charm, the ministry wouldn't have let you off with a few compulsory apologies. Lockhart ruffled his disordered hair and didn't take the bait. He scanned the wizard before him, the widely known Severus Snape, up and down. You didn't come all this way just to check on me. We're not exactly on friendly terms. I have something I want your help with. Severus wasted no preamble. A smile flickered across Lockhart's face. Since Dumbledore had taken him to the ministry to surrender, he'd adopted a sort of broken jar attitude, an almost indifferent air regarding the fame and status he had once coveted. Being asked for help fed the remnants of his vanity. Still, he shook his head decisively. No, I don't have the time. Lockhart had expected to see surprise or disappointment light up Severus's face at such a blunt refusal. That would have puffed up his ego. Instead, Severus merely nodded as if it were natural. Of course, you owe me nothing. Lockhart's enthusiasm drained at once. Fine, then there's nothing more to discuss. I have work at the ministry that needs my attention. He turned to leave. Severus's voice followed him. What if this isn't about helping me, but about helping you restore that dreadful reputation? Lockhart paused, turned, and snorted coldly. Do you take me for an idiot? My reputation is completely ruined. I hear howlers set my house on fire 12 times. No one can repair it, not even Dumbledore. Severus's voice was quiet. You should hear how reputations can be turned around. People love the story of a prodigal son returning. Your decision to confess to the ministry was a good first step. Lockhart's protest rose. But what can I do? All my stories were stolen. None of them were mine. I'm not the adventurer the public imagined, and I'm no great writer. How can I turn back? I'm just mediocre. Severus didn't flinch. That's the mediocrity you perceive in yourself, Gilderoy. It's not that you lack brilliance. You simply misunderstand where your strengths lie. You don't need daring exploits or a glamorous facade to earn respect and admiration. He inclined his head toward Lockhart. You did, after all, possess an unusual talent for memory charms and for constructing memories. And you can tell a story, perhaps not the ones you claimed as your own, but you know how to shape narrative. Why not work in the direction you're actually suited for? Use your skills to help those with damaged memories. From a third-party perspective, help people record the lives they've lived but cannot write down themselves. That would be a legitimate path to restoring your name. Lockhart's steps faltered. Severus pressed on. The public is watching you closely right now. If you show genuine contrition and use your talents for good, that bad reputation can turn to good much faster than you imagine. This is the prime chance. Miss it, and later you may find no one cares. When you see your mother next time, Severus added quietly, how will you explain it to her? Sorry, mother, your son has been a fraud. Is that what you want to tell her? Lockhart's resistance broke with a theatrical groan. Fine, you win. You, Severus Snape, have found my weak spot. He spun toward him, cheeks flushed. I'm an idiot. I thought I could refuse you easily. You've beaten me. I can't give up those things, and I won't tell such things to my mother. All right, what do you want me to do? Say it. I'll do anything. Severus allowed himself the smallest of smiles and patted Lockhart on the shoulder. Then come with me, Victor. 258, Side Story 7, Forgotten Clues. When Severus returned to the pre-wet house with Gilderoy Lockhart, Muriel froze for a moment, then let out a shriek. Good heavens, who is that? Who am I looking at? Her outburst startled both Severus and Sirius, who had already been standing in the courtyard. Even Lockhart trembled. Then, as if suddenly understanding why Muriel reacted so strongly, he hid his face and looked terrified. I'm not. How can you say that? I've bought every one of your books. I kept every issue of which weekly you were on the cover of. I remember every letter I've ever written you. Muriel's excitement curdled into fury. Gilderoy Lockhart, you fraud. Lockhart crumpled into a corner, head in his hands, too ashamed to show his face. Ever since his deception was exposed, he had been terrified of meeting his former admirers. The ministry had pressed him into helping restore victims' memories, and it had become a refuge, somewhere to hide as the world hurled abuse at him. He had not expected that his old fame had been so thoroughly cultivated that, by following Severus to a random house, he'd run into a loyal fan like Muriel. Severus understood quickly enough. Lockhart had always been a friend of women. Even a blunt, short-tempered old woman living alone could have adored him once. The ministry ought to throw someone like you in Azkaban. How did they let you off so easily? Muriel ranted. And those books. Refund everyone. Those lies are filthy. I'm ashamed I ever read them. How can you come to my house? I should expose you right now. Let everyone see. As Muriel screamed, Lockhart backed away, his hand slipping toward his sleeve to pull his wand and apparat. If you want to carry this shame forever, you could run, Severus said quietly. Lockhart raised his wand with shaking hands. He looked past Severus's words, but his panic made it impossible to apparate. The people you hurt weren't just the wizards whose memories you changed and whose stories you stole, Severus continued. They were your fans, too. Turning yourself in will help your sentence, but it won't erase what you've done to them. No, I can't face it. I have to go. I'm leaving, Lockhart whispered. Severus pressed his hand to Lockhart's shoulder, forcing him to meet his gaze. You've already lost everything. Since there's nothing left to lose, stay and face it. Try. Lockhart's wand-waving froze. He kept shaking, but Severus's words steadied him. He drew a breath. You're right. It's like this already. There's nothing worse than this. Muriel didn't let up. Her fury shifted to Severus. This is the professional you brought? A fraud? A thief? A shameless scoundrel? I understand how you feel, but our goal is to help Melia, isn't it? Severus said with a patience that surprised Sirius. Whatever he was before, if you trust me or Dumbledore, let him look at Miss Melia. Just a quick examination, all right? Muriel glared and muttered, but she made no move to stop Severus leading Lockhart to Melia. Lockhart's hands still trembled on his wand, but habit and training brought a confidence he hadn't had as a celebrity. What is her condition? He asked. 9 years ago, her parents were killed after trying to leave Lord Voldemort. Since then, her mind has been unreliable. At first, she talked to herself, and now her behavior is as you see it. While Severus explained, Lockhart pointed his wand at Melia's temple and murmured an incantation. He examined the girl, who stared blankly ahead. It took 3 or 5 minutes. Then Lockhart lowered his wand and frowned. I'm no healer from St. Mungo's, but I can say this. Self-inflicted mental damage doesn't usually reach this level. Severus's face tightened. You mean someone altered her memory? Lockhart hesitated. There are signs. Her mind's in shambles. You can see that. Whatever memory charm did, this is only a trigger. Fundamentally, she cares about something so intensely she can't function, yet she can't remember what it is. Sirius, listening at the edge of the room, made his own deduction aloud. Seems obvious. Maybe her parents sensed something before they died and erased part of her memory, but they never meant for it to go this far. It was a plausible theory, but finding the cause was one thing. Their task was to help the girl. As someone who had worked with memory charms, Lockhart offered a course of action. Memory charms aren't unforgivable, there are counter-curses. But the longer a charm holds, the harder it is to break. Especially with her. She's pushed herself so much that reversing it will be difficult. Difficult doesn't mean impossible, Severus said. Lockhart's trembling stopped. He straightened, the old posture of a practitioner returning. We need to find clues about what she was made to forget by the memory charm. 259. Extra 8-letter. What she forgot. Sirius stared at Lockhart as if he had gone mad. She can't even remember what she lost, no matter how hard she tries. How can we be expected to help her find a piece of memory she doesn't even know she's missing? Lockhart glanced down at the black dog at his feet. He'd spent recent weeks trying to clean up his own blunders at the ministry, but he wasn't so out of touch that he didn't recognize Sirius Black, recently exonerated after Peter Pettigrew's conviction. "I'm only responsible for finding the cause and offering a possible solution," he said. "Whether it actually works is another matter." He shrugged, as if his duty ended there. Severus stepped forward. "That's not necessarily true. If her parents erased that part of her memory, they may also have altered how she perceives their home. In that case, even if she suspects she's forgotten something and looks for clues around the house, she won't find anything because that part of her perception is wiped. We can go to her ancestral home, the Foley house, and look for anything left behind." "I won't be needed for what comes next," Lockhart began. Severus shoved him toward the door. "Don't forget what I told you. Do you really think what you're doing now makes up for the damage you've caused?" Lockhart fell silent. Nearby, Muriel bristled. "Make up for it. He'll never make up for it in his life. That despicable liar should be swept into the dustbin of history. His only purpose is to endure the curses of those who come after him." None of them wanted to stay to listen to her rant. Severus, Lockhart, and Sirius left the Prewitt house at once, and as soon as they were outside, Sirius muttered, "I don't see why you're getting involved in this. Is it just because Dumbledore asked you to?" Severus looked at him. "I think it's more of a coincidence." "A coincidence? Don't you think that girl's parents are very like your brother? Or rather, the image of Regulus you've always held. That's exactly the life her parents went through." Sirius stopped short, and Lockhart studied him for a few moments. Gilderoy's instincts as a story thief and a professional writer told him there was something unusual behind this exchange. Sirius said no more. The Foley house wasn't far from the Prewitt place. After Melia was taken away by Muriel, the Foley house had been almost emptied. That was a common fate among old pureblood families. With so few acceptable marriage partners to preserve their bloodlines, inbreeding and decline were inevitable. The Foleys had once produced a minister for magic, Hector Foley, but now only a distant relative remained, long since moved to Ireland. The Foley manor, like many old pureblood houses, was huge and crumbling. House elves had either died out or been released. The place smelled of dust and neglect and hadn't been cleaned in years. Severus noted the smashed portraits that lined the walls and began to assign tasks. "Sirius, search the first floor," he said. "Gilderoy, the third. I'll take the second. Focus on records and letters, especially anything from around 9 years ago." They split up and began their search. On the second floor, Severus opened what looked like 2 guest rooms and then a study, a room strewn with parchment, old books, and scattered notes. It had been abandoned for some time. He flicked his wand to tidy the mess a little and began combing through the papers on the desk. The study's owner appeared to be a scholar of the history of magic, which fit Severus's impression of the Foleys. He had known, in a general way, that the couple had died, but not the details. At the time of their deaths, Severus had just graduated from Hogwarts and had not yet found favor with Voldemort. The Foleys were not true fanatics like the Lestranges. They had academic standing and research of their own. They'd initially been drawn to Voldemort by his early rhetoric, visions of a world where pure bloods led wizards into the sunlit future, but as he grew more extreme and power-obsessed, his true nature became clear. Those who wanted to leave often discovered they could not. As Severus sifted through the correspondence, one letter caught his eye. It was different from the rest. "Sterling, I can't keep lying to myself anymore. Something has happened at home recently that's made me think. Maybe you were right. We've been indulging a fantasy. He will never lead us to our common ideals. If you've really decided to leave, then take Melia and flee Britain altogether. Go to Africa, America, anywhere. Just don't stay in Europe. Please, whatever you do, do not tell the Dark Lord. He won't allow it. He'll never permit anyone to leave." In his eyes, we were never partners or friends. We were tools. No withdrawal is allowed. Uselessness means being discarded. Dead tools. Severus rubbed his chin. The letter was unsigned. He couldn't tell who had written to the Foleys just before they planned to leave Voldemort's ranks. The Foleys wouldn't have discussed such a thing with a casual acquaintance. The writer must have been someone close. Clearly, the Foleys hadn't heeded the advice. Their attempt to leave had ended in their deaths. And the letter's author? Were they still alive, and where might they be now? 260, bonus chapter 9, the feeling of my brain being engaged. I found this in the attic. About 2 or 3 hours later, the three of them, 2 men and 1 dog, were back together in the living room on the first floor. Lockhart produced his find first, an old wooden box, still locked. This lock has a special charm on it. A regular Alohomora won't open it. Sirius glanced at him and sneered. You actually know how to use Alohomora? Lockhart, used by now to that level of sarcasm after the last few days, shrugged. During my time with the Memory Charm Reversal Squad at the Ministry of Magic, I had plenty of chances to review the spells we learned at school. Of course, it's also possible my Alohomora is simply mediocre. Severus set the letters he'd found in the study down on the coffee table and examined the box. He tapped the keyhole with his wand. It's been reinforced with an anti-Alohomora charm, he said. Can you get it open? Lockhart asked. Severus smiled. Why must we open the lock? A door is only useful when it's weaker than the wall. But if the wall itself is weaker, a red light streamed from his wand at the box. The wood vibrated under the spell and spiderwebbed with cracks. In moments, the entire box splintered into fragments, the brass lock body astonishingly left intact. Lockhart complained, You're not just opening a different door in the wall, you smashed the whole wall and left the door. Sirius looked skeptical. If someone wanted to hide something in this box, why wouldn't they consider that the box might be weaker than the lock? Because at first the box and the lock were equally strong, Severus explained, rummaging through the pieces. The protective charm on the box was laid earlier and eroded with time before the locks did. Inside were a robe, an elaborately made quill, and a badge identical to the dark mark. Sirius saw the badge and let out a cold snort. Of course, children of Death Eaters, what else would you expect? Severus heard the barb aimed at Melia, and it annoyed him. That badge wasn't the same as Voldemort's branded tattoo. It was the emblem of a student group at Hogwarts. Students sympathetic to Voldemort who had formed their own association because they hadn't graduated and couldn't join the Death Eaters. Lockhart shot Sirius a look, frowning. Regardless of the past, Melia's parents had died fighting Voldemort. But his relationship with Sirius was lukewarm, so he said no more. Severus ignored Sirius's snide tone. The man had been contrite earlier that morning about Regulus, but by afternoon his old hardness had returned. Severus picked up the robe. The Hogwarts crest marked it as a school uniform, and its size suggested an upper-year student. The garment itself was unremarkable until Severus turned it over and found a gray wolf embroidered on the hem. "What's this mean?" he asked. Both Sirius and Lockhart frowned. The quill was less a mystery. Sirius recognized it as a poorly selling design once sold by a novelty stationery shop in Diagon Alley, Transforming Ink Novelty, discontinued after under a month. At Hogwarts, anyone using that quill would have been ridiculed. Sirius remembered it because Regulus had been tricked into buying one, and Sirius had mocked him at home for ages. These must be Melia's things, he concluded. That was the sensible deduction. Robe style and quill release date made it likely, but it gave them no real clue. Severus turned to Sirius. "Did you find anything on the first floor?" Sirius shook his head, which disappointed Severus. The letters from the study were unsigned. They only indicated the writers had been close to Melia and her parents. Then Sirius brightened. "But the lack of findings is a finding in itself." He got their attention. The Foley family is ancient pureblood like the Blacks. Families like that never don't have a wine cellar. There was a hint of pride in his voice, not pride in blood so much as pride in spotting a clue that wasn't obvious. Severus understood. "You couldn't find the Foley wine cellar?" "No matter where I looked, I couldn't find it," Sirius said, "so it's hidden in some unusual way. If it's hidden, the wine cellar must hold something important. If we find it, we might find the key to Milia Foley's memory erasure. Sirius's sudden usefulness, using his head, pleased Severus. Good, Sirius. Remember this feeling, the feeling of your brain being engaged. Soon the three of them dispersed through the old Foley residence, combing the first floor for the secret entrance to the Foley wine cellar.